Good morning. So we're in a conversation this January, turns out it's February now, about being present, about making sure that this year, 2024, we are present, that we don't become translucent, that we don't fade away, that we are not sliding away into the background, but we step into the year. We step into our homes, we step into our community, we step into our workspace, our school, our play. We are present. And that's the challenge as we move forward. Here's something that I believe to be true, and that is this. I believe you want your life to matter. At least I want my life to matter, so I think that's true about you. I believe that you want to make a difference. It doesn't have to be the biggest difference, but some difference in this world, some act of good in this world. I believe that that's what motivates many of us to do something, almost anything good. So last week I had the opportunity to be up at Skyrocket on Sunday morning, and if you were here, you got to hear Brian Russell preach. Brian is going to be our interim pastor up at Skyrocket because last Sunday, Pastor J.D., who is our church planter, told the church that he's going to be stepping down from the senior pastorate there at Skyrocket. And he's not stepping down for any bad reasons or anything like that. It's just time in his life that he feels like God is leading him in a direction that he can't continue to move in unless he steps away from that leadership position. And so he's stepping away. But here's the thing. JD has done such an incredible job at Skyrocket. He planted all the seeds. He was up there and he made connections with people in the community, and he hosted all kinds of taste and see events, from opening the swimming pool to serving coffee and sitting in an empty building waiting for somebody to come by and buy a cup of coffee, and all kinds of things like sports camp. And basically, he did so much. But planting a church is hard. It's hard work. And it takes a tremendous amount of energy. And we call it a launch team, the group that gathers together to plant a church. It's a launch team because you're trying to launch a church. And it takes a tremendous amount of energy. And so think of it, Skyrocket is a great name for this illustration. And so Skyrocket, you're launching a church. But most often what happens with your launch team is this. Just like a booster rocket, that launch team runs out of fuel. And once the rocket is in orbit, runs out of fuel and falls back to Earth and burns up on reentry. Now, here's the thing. We don't want J.D. and Megan to burn up on reentry. We don't want them to burn out, and we don't want them to burn up. And so we celebrate him stepping away, and we're excited for what's next. And he's going to continue to orbit the earth in Skyrocket Church as a member. But it's an exciting time as we move forward. Now, we're going to circle back to Skyrocket in a minute, okay? Well, more than a minute, in a couple minutes. Talking about church, it's kind of a strange and difficult thing for me, because here's the thing. I don't want to sell you on a church. I'm not trying to sell Blue Mountain to you. It's not my desire. It's not my purpose. It's not what I'm all about. I think about church a lot. I spend a lot of time at church. In fact, I probably think about church too much. And I've spent year after year after year pouring my life, my energy into serving the church. And I see church everywhere I go. I mean, in the weirdest way. So I was on this motorcycle trip, and I was moving through, this last summer, I was moving through Virginia, and there were towns in Virginia that I promise you, there were more churches than houses. I promise you. These little tiny churches that you could fit in our bathroom in there. It was an amazing thing. I saw church everywhere. It was a Sunday morning, and I woke up in a hotel, and here, show me that picture. I get up, and the first thing, you go to the bathroom, right? That's what you do the first thing in the morning. Show the picture, please. Oh, I thought if I snapped, it might happen. Oh, well. It's a good picture. We'll come back to it. Well, anyway. Okay, thank you. Do you see it? Church. Who would name their toilet church? Some people think of church differently than others, Okay, so if you're starting to wonder, yes, this will be a little bit of potty humor today. But this church, this is yours and mine, this is our awkward attempt to live out this faith. That's what we do. That's what this is. This is our awkward attempt of living out this faith together. We have never claimed to be the ultimate representation of Jesus Christ on earth. We've never claimed that. We have never claimed that we have every detail right, ever. We've never claimed to be perfect in any way. But this is our attempt at following Jesus, and it's real. Stumbles and struggles and all of it, it's just real. This is what we do. An apologia is it's a defense for our actions. This is who we are. It's what we do. We're trying to follow Jesus. A question that people in church leadership ask often, and it often gets asked to me or just other people that are in church leadership. And the question is this: if your church were to disappear today, would anybody notice its absence? If your church were to disappear today, would anybody notice its absence? I can think of a few people who would notice our absence. They wave at you on Sunday mornings when you pull in. It's not funny, but if you don't laugh, you cry, right? I can think of a lawsuit that would disappear between a certain cell phone provider in a city. That would disappear if we didn't exist. But would anybody else notice if Blue Mountain Community Church was no longer present? A lot of people, actually we're going to circle back to that one too. So now we're circling back to two things, okay? Remind me, we're circling back twice. Don't let me forget it. A lot of people are kind of apathetic about any corporate gathering of church anymore. There's a new Pew Research study that came out last week, or at least it was published last week. And this new Pew study says that for the first time ever in America, the group that claims no affiliation with any church or religion is larger than any other group. 28% of Americans claim to have, they check the box. When you check the box, it says Christian, like Protestant or Catholic or none. 28% of the population checks the box that says none. 28%. They're made up of atheists, agnostics, and people who just don't want to claim any faith at all. 28% check that box. 24% check the box that says Protestant, and 23% check the box that says Catholic. Now, I did the math. That's 75%. Who were the other 25%? I don't know, they didn't say. But it's kind of a fascinating makeup of people that check this box that says none. And when you look at the racial divide, you look at the gender divide, the education, it's fascinating stuff. But the reality is, these people who check that box are, in a sense, untethered. They're untethered. They're not connected. And they look at it and they said, what is the one common thing that guides their thinking and their morality? And the thing that guides their morality is they don't want to hurt others and they want to make their decisions in a logical way. Sounds like me. I don't want to hurt others. And make my decision in a logical way. But that's their morality, is based on those two values. Now, later in this year, we're going to do a short series called Hitting the Wall. Hitting the Wall, where as a Christ follower, you go to church and you're trying to seek after Jesus, but a lot of times you kind of hit the wall. Is there anything more than this? Is there another level? Is there another place to go with my faith? And so you kind of hit the wall. We're going to look at that this year. But some people walk away from church because they've kind of hit the wall. Other people have been burned by the church, or not specifically by the church. They've been burned by people in the church, or even church leadership. They've been burned by people, but because it's connected to the church, the burn is worse. There's a spiritual element to it. The cut is deeper because of that spiritual element, and it just is, it's awful. And so some have stepped away in tremendous pain. I also have a couple of burns along the way from the church. But I've also seen the church in its moments of perfection. In the moments when it was the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. I've seen it like that. You know how every once in a while you see a sunset and you're like, wow, that's the sunset that I can now go to my grave because I've seen the glory of the Lord kind of thing, you know? No, never mind. That was not good. But every once in a while, and I'm not talking about the church when the music was just divine. That's not what I'm talking about, although it wasn't too bad today. Or the message was just perfect. I mean, that preacher, man, he was on today, and wow. I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about presentation. I'm not talking about the coffee. But those moments when the church stepped into the moment and it lived out its faith. And it was the church in action. I've seen those moments, and they make all the difference. So Jesus had this encounter with a woman at the well, at Jacob's well. It's in Samaria. And in this encounter, the Samaritans, they worshiped on a mountain. Samaritans were part Jewish and part something else. And so they weren't pure-blooded Jews. Now, they still worshiped the same God, but they worshiped in another place because they weren't worthy of worshiping God in the temple. And they didn't want to worship God in the temple. They worshiped God on the mountain. And so the Jews, they worshiped God in Jerusalem at the temple. That was their place to worship. And so Jesus encounters this woman at the well, and there's a conversation. And Jesus reframes what it is to worship God. This is John 4:21. Jesus replied, "Believe me, dear woman, the time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. You Samaritans know very little about the one you worship, while we Jews know all about him. For salvation comes through the Jews, but the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way, for God is spirit. So those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth." So true worship of God isn't about all the details. What if you got something wrong? What if you got one of the details wrong? It's not about all of the details. It's a posture of worshiping God in spirit and in truth. Because the truth is, I've never met anybody who had it perfectly down, whose theology was perfect. I mean, I doubt that mine is perfect. It's probably close, but it's not perfect. It's not about knowing all the right stuff. The Jews knew all of the right stuff, and they missed out on who Jesus was. It's about worshiping in spirit and in truth. Often, people go to church out of a place of desperation. You're desperate in a moment. You're looking for answers. You're going through something. And so a lot of times, people, they'll turn to Google. They'll turn to everything. But some people will turn to the church and seek out answers and protection and healing. I've told this story 2 times previously. The last time I think I told it was 2016. And so if you have been here since if you date back to 2016, this story might be familiar to you. So bear with me, but I'm going to tell it to those of you who have come since 2016. We lived in Missouri, and as I was riding the motorcycle this summer, I went through where we used to live, and there's this park back behind where we lived. It's called Jacomo, Jackson County, Missouri. Jacomo. It's kind of a weird name, but Lake Jacomo. And I would go there nearly every day. Every day I could get there at about 2 o'clock and walk and pray. And this particular day, I had gone to this certain area that's the group camping area, and the group camping area was always closed during the week. And so the gate was shut during the weekends. Boy Scouts would be there. There'd be a Girl Scout camp. There'd be whatever group camping events you could think of that would happen back there. But during the week, it was closed. The gate was shut. It was the perfect place to walk and pray. And so that day, I'd gone to walk and pray, but as I pulled up and got out of the car, I noticed the gate was open. The gate's open. It's never open. That's odd. And so I walked back, and I'm walking down this little gravel lane, and it goes, I'm several hundred yards in, and it turns to the right, and I'm turning to the right, and I see this big 55-gallon barrel, and it's a garbage barrel for the campers, and it's tipped over, and all the garbage is spewed out. I'm like, wow, what kind of kids did that? So I go a little bit further and around another bend, and there's another big 55-gallon drum tipped over, and the garbage is all spewed out of that one too. And I'm walking along, and then something jumps up off in the distance. And I hear it jump up, and I look, because Jacomo has some of the biggest deer, and the bucks at Jacomo were incredible because it was really hard to get a hunting permit to hunt those deer. And so some of them had these great big antlers, and some of them were prize deer and beautiful. And so I'm looking to see, oh, wow, does this deer, does it have antlers? Is it a big buck? And I'm looking closely, and it's running off. I see buckskin running, And then I noticed something. It actually wasn't running away. It was running toward me. I'm like, oh, no antlers, okay. And then, it's the right color, and it's running toward me, and I noticed something different about it. As it's running toward me, I can see that it has this big flaps on its face going boom, 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 like that. I'm like, that's not like any deer I've ever seen before. And I noticed it's got these great big canine teeth boom, boom, as it's running toward me. I'm like, that's not a deer. And I realize in that moment, as it's coming, it's a mastiff, a big mastiff that looked the same color as a deer. That's probably what got into all those garbage cans. And it's running toward me. And here's the funny thing. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a dog that's running to you and a dog that's running at you, right? And I started to suspect that dog's not running to me, it's running at me. I'm thinking, well, it might be running to me, but what if it's running at me? And I didn't have anything. I'm like, I don't have anything in my hands. I don't have anything to defend myself if it's running at me, and it's a big dog. and I'm starting to feel pretty exposed out there by myself. And then suddenly I remembered, as I was coming in, about 40 feet behind me was a porta-john, a porta-potty. And I spun around and ran for everything I had and ran right into that porta potty and shut the door and hit the occupied switch. And there I was. Any port in a storm, right? And so there I was, and the dog slides right up to the door. And I can hear it outside sniffing around and snarling a little bit. And I'm like, it might have been the nicest dog in town. I have no idea, but it felt like it was not the nicest dog. And so I'm in this porta potty, and I'm thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? I'm stuck, and I didn't have my cell phone because I went there to pray, not to talk to people. So my phone was back at the car, and so there I stood in the porta potty. We'll circle back to that one too. How's that? The writer of Hebrews is trying to help the Jews, the Hebrews, understand how different this faith is that Jesus is introducing to them. How radically different. And so Jews came to God, and they brought their sin to God, and they had to offer a sacrifice, an animal sacrifice. And the animal was killed, and the blood was sprinkled, and the animal was burnt on a altar. And so only the priest then, at the temple, only the priest could enter into the Holy of Holies, go behind the curtain there in the temple, because that's where the presence of God was. But Jesus changed things. Jesus' death on the cross, his resurrection, meant something very different. It meant that we all have access to God differently. We don't have to come to him with a sacrifice. Jesus was himself the sacrifice. So Hebrews chapter 10, verse 19. So, dear brothers and sisters, we can boldly enter heaven's most holy place because of the blood of Jesus. By his death, Jesus opened a new and life-giving way through the curtain into the most holy place. And since we have a great high priest who rules over God's house, let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting him. For our guilty consciences have been sprinkled with Christ's blood to make us clean, and our bodies have been washed with pure water. So now there's this new way to enter into the presence of God. Let us hold tightly without wavering to the hope we affirm, for God can be trusted to keep his promise. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, and let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of his return is drawing near. Let us go right into the presence of God with sincere hearts, fully trusting him. What if our church didn't get it right? What if we missed something theologically along the way? What if we got one detail wrong, but it's an important detail, and now we're trying to approach God? What if our church missed it? It doesn't say that we go into God's presence because our church got it right. It says we go into our presence because of Jesus and his blood. We can enter into his presence by trusting him. Let us hold tightly to this hope that we affirm, because God can be trusted. Let us think of ways to motivate one another to doing acts of love and good works. And let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do. You know, it's funny, that's some of the same statistics that came out from Pew. I saw another statistic that said most people come about once a month to church. It used to be people came every week to church. Most people come about once a month. You might do better. Did you know if you came once a month, but now you come twice, the church size would double? Amazing statistics. Let's not neglect our meeting together, but encourage one another, especially now. All right, so I said we're going to circle back. Let's circle back for a second. If the church disappeared today, would anybody notice its absence? Blue Mountain has been here in this city for 126 years. 126, that's a long time. And over those years, you have done some incredible ministry in this place. And some of the things that you've done over those years have come and gone. And some of the things that came were incredible. There was once a radio ministry that came out of us a long time ago. And it was a powerful ministry. There was a time when Celebrate Recovery was a big deal. It was one of our biggest ministries here at the church. It was before my time, but there was a time that mattered. And there were a lot of people finding health and healing through Celebrate Recovery. It was great. There was a time, I think even COVID, during COVID, we did Study Spot. Study Spot was a great thing. If you don't know about it, what we did was we, as leadership team, we got together and we said, what can we do? How can we meet a need that nobody's meeting? And we decided, hey, you know what? Our middle school kids They're the ones who need something and they're not getting their needs met. Middle school kids, some of them don't have internet access. Some of them need to be somebody to sit and watch them, or they're not going to do anything as they sit at home and they're supposed to go to school. And some of them, they don't have meals. And so churches operate from different set of rules. And we could open up our building where all the schools were closed. We could open up our building. So we opened up our fellowship hall, Baker Hall. And kids went to middle school in Baker Hall. And the school district got behind that, and they sent teachers' aides who actually stood with the kids and helped them get to their classes. And the school district got behind us, and they actually sent us meals. And so we got to feed. It was great. And now it's over. Because COVID, thank God, is over. Well, maybe it's not totally over, but it's over enough. Right? And kids are all back at school. Things like that come and they go. If the church were to disappear, would the community even notice? We have some other great ministries. The Ark, our daycare center, has been here for over 50 years now. Thousands of kids have gone through the Ark, have learned a little bit about Jesus, learned how to read a little bit, learned their alphabet. I don't know what all they learned. They learned stuff. It's good. Thousands of families have been impacted. We have MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, that meets a couple times a month. It's great. These women come together and it serves their family. They talk about life and faith and family. It's good. We do every year Operation Advent. We used to call it Advent Conspiracy. I'm having a hard time letting go of those words, but the word conspiracy was kind of ruined. So we call it Operation Advent now. But we give away thousands of dollars every Christmas to a partner. And sometimes it's a local partner, and sometimes it's a partner far away. But the need is real. And you give a lot. We have ministry partners around the world. And some of our ministry partners, you are their biggest support financially. You're the biggest giver, and allows them to stay on the mission field. There are groups who meet here in our building on a regular basis. There's all kinds. You do a lot of stuff. I don't need to tell you all of it. What if the church were to disappear? In all likelihood, the people, you, would find somewhere else to be. But you know what? Our unique expression of faith would be gone. And it would be sad. It'd be sad. Sharing life, love, and faith. Engaging the present, creating the future. I mean, these things would be gone if this church wasn't here. So let's circle back to Skyrocket for a second. Skyrocket is in Prescott, 20 miles north. And the church there, Prescott Community Church, had eventually gone out. And then we went in and started Skyrocket. It's been there for almost 2.5 years now. And in that time of doing ministry there, we've discovered there's some things that community is really lacking. I mean, at first it didn't have a church. Well, now it has a church, and it relies on that church, our church, an expression of us. It's our DNA in there with a different name. But it's missing things in Prescott like grocery store. There's no grocery store in Prescott. Only place to get food in Prescott is the Tuxedo. It's an expensive restaurant. It's good. But there's no food. And so what we're talking about, and what we want to do is put in a little marketplace where we can sell some basics, milk and eggs, bread, the essentials. And partnering with BMAC and putting in a food pantry. And this little building, we have a second building up there. Used to be the Presbyterian Church. We're talking about renovating that building and making it into that space. Oh, it's a food desert up there. But you know what else? It's a coffee desert too. Right? Who can live without coffee? And so we're talking about putting our coffee machine, our little coffee shop over there. And maybe meeting needs in that community. Just basic need. Now, it's going to take a lot to make it happen. It's going to be hard work. But we're experimenting with trying to find a way that we, as a church can be essential in our community. And so right now, that's what we're looking at out there. Okay, great, that's awesome out there. What about here? What do we do here? What are some of the things that we can do here to meet the need in this space, in this place? And we've been wrestling with some of that too, because we don't need a grocery store. We got some. We don't need coffee shops. There's a bunch of them, right? But what are we lacking here? And one of the things we're wrestling around with and potentially going to look at is putting up a gymnasium. And the gymnasium, here's the deal. I have always wanted a building named after me, and that I'll settle for gym. Yeah, I will settle. Even if it's spelled with a G, I'm okay. But the idea being meeting a need, meeting a real need. And in the winter, it's nice to have a place for people to come and walk. It's not outside in the cold, putting in some kind of thing like that, and putting in a place for community to gather, a place to play basketball or volleyball or indoor pickleball or something, a place for our youth to go, a place that we would use to reach our community and then share with them the love of Jesus Christ. And so we're looking at these things. Will they happen? I want them all to happen. What's the timeline? I don't know. But we want to be essential. Churches can become transparent. Churches can fade into the background. Churches can disappear, and they're doing it all around us. They're disappearing. Don't be translucent. Don't fade into the background. Don't disappear. So I told you I was going to circle back to the other. This is the last circle back. Let's go back to the porta potty with me, if you will. So there I am in this porta potty. And I'm back on this area that nobody comes during the week. And have you ever been in one of those? They stink. And so it's stinky. And there's this little slit, and I'm looking out the slit. Is that dog still out there? I don't hear it. I know. Some of you are like, it's just a puppy. I get it. I hear you. Anyway, but there I am. I'm looking, and I hear a car. There's a car. And it's coming, and it wasn't coming in. It was coming out. And so I'm thinking, okay, if I time this just right, maybe I can get him to stop. And so the car is coming right past my porta potty, and I throw the door open and jump out. Can you imagine how scary that would be? Somebody jumping out of the porta potty. That was me. And the car stopped instead of speeding away. And the person behind the wheel rolled the window down just a little bit. And I said, hey, listen, there's this dog out here, and it seems kind of aggressive. And I'm kind of waiting in here. Can I get a ride with you back to my car? Or even just walk beside your car? And the young woman driving the car, she had a special needs kid there. So why would you open your car and let the weird guy like me in? I don't know. But she goes, we were on a picnic back here, and that dog is aggressive. And the reason we're leaving is because that dog kind of scared us away. And so go ahead and get in. So I got in the car, and she gave me a ride out. And so I lived to tell the story. And I call it animal control. Church isn't perfect. It's not perfect. This expression of church, it's not perfect. And sometimes we might not get it all right. And sometimes we might even get it kind of wrong. But we're trying. This is our awkward attempt at following Jesus. It's our awkward attempt at living out this faith together to the very best of our ability. We're not the ultimate representation of Jesus on earth. That's not who we are. And yet, this is our real attempt to follow him. Let us hold tightly to this hope that we affirm, because God can be trusted. Let us think of ways to motivate one another toward acts of love and good works. let us not neglect meeting together, but encourage one another, and all the more. And let us follow Jesus, the only hope this world has ever known.